The streets of Los Angeles shimmered beneath the glow of rain-soaked streetlights. It was one of those quiet evenings when people hurried past with umbrellas, too busy to notice the world around them. Luxury cars lined the entrance of one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, where only the wealthiest guests usually dined. Inside, soft piano music filled the elegant dining hall. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and waiters moved gracefully between tables, serving expensive meals to well-dressed customers. Just then, a man wearing a faded black jacket, blue jeans, and an old baseball cap slowly walked toward the entrance. His shoes were slightly worn. His clothes looked simple. Nothing about him suggested wealth or fame. Most people walked right past him without giving him a second glance. That man was Johnny Depp. Not because he wanted to hide from the world, but because he enjoyed living simple moments away from cameras and flashing lights. As Johnny reached the restaurant door, a young waiter stepped in front of him before he could enter. The waiter looked him up and down with a judgmental expression. "I'm sorry, sir," he said coldly. "I think you're at the wrong place." Johnny smiled politely. "I'd just like to have dinner." The waiter folded his arms. "This restaurant isn't really for people dressed like this." A few nearby customers overheard the conversation. Some exchanged amused looks. One man quietly laughed into his glass. A woman whispered to her friend, "He probably can't even afford the menu." Johnny heard every word, but his expression never changed. Instead of becoming angry, he simply nodded. "I understand." Just as he turned to leave, an elderly security guard standing nearby spoke softly. The guard looked carefully at Johnny's face. For a brief second, it seemed as though he recognized him. But before he could say anything, Johnny gently shook his head with a small smile, silently asking him not to reveal his identity. The guard respected his wish. He remained silent. After a few moments, the restaurant manager noticed the situation through the glass doors. Not wanting to create a scene in front of wealthy customers, he walked outside. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked. The waiter quickly replied, "This gentleman doesn't seem like our usual guests." The manager glanced at Johnny for only a second before saying, "Let him in." The waiter looked surprised. I said let him in." Reluctantly, the waiter stepped aside. Johnny quietly entered the restaurant. Instead of choosing one of the beautiful tables near the windows, he selected the smallest table in the far corner, almost hidden from everyone else. He opened the menu. The prices didn't matter to him, but something else did. He watched the people around him. A businessman was speaking harshly to his assistant. A young couple barely looked at each other, both busy staring at their phones. Another customer complained loudly because his soup was 2 minutes late. Johnny sighed softly. Sometimes, he thought, people surrounded by luxury forget the value of kindness. A few minutes passed. Everyone who arrived after Johnny received water, then appetizers, then drinks. But Johnny's table remained empty. Not even a glass of water. Nearly 20 minutes went by. The same waiter walked past Johnny again and again, pretending not to notice him. Finally, Johnny raised his hand politely. "Excuse me." The waiter stopped without hiding his annoyance. "Yes, I think my order hasn't been taken." The waiter glanced at his notebook. "Oh, you'll have to wait. We're busy." Without another word, he walked away. Several nearby customers witnessed everything. No one said anything. Some simply looked away. Others acted as if nothing unusual was happening. In the corner of the restaurant worked a teenage busboy named Ethan. Unlike the others, Ethan had noticed everything from the very beginning. He wasn't rich. He didn't come from a wealthy family. Every evening after school, he worked long hours to help his widowed mother pay rent and buy groceries. He understood what it felt like to be judged. After looking around to make sure no one was watching, Ethan quietly filled a glass with fresh water. He carefully carried it across the restaurant and placed it on Johnny's table. I'm sorry you've been waiting so long, sir," he whispered. Johnny looked up and smiled warmly. "Thank you." Ethan smiled nervously. "It isn't much, but I didn't think anyone should sit here without even a glass of water." Johnny looked into the young man's eyes. There was honesty there. Kindness. Respect. Qualities far more valuable than expensive suits or luxury watches. Johnny reached into his pocket, But instead of taking out money, he simply asked, "What's your name?" The young boy looked surprised. "Ethan. And how old are you?" 17. "Do you enjoy working here?" For a moment, Ethan's smile disappeared. He looked down at the floor before quietly answering, "I don't really have a choice." Johnny remained silent. He sensed there was much more behind those simple words. Before Ethan could say another sentence, a loud voice echoed across the restaurant. "Ethan!" The manager was glaring at him from across the room. "What are you doing?" "I told you to clean table 7. Ethan quickly apologized. "I'm sorry, sir." As he hurried away, Johnny noticed something that almost no one else had seen. The boy's shoes had holes in them. His uniform had been stitched together several times, and despite working harder than everyone else, he was treated as though he barely existed. Johnny slowly leaned back in his chair. For the first time that evening, his dinner was no longer the reason he had come. Something else had captured his attention. And before this night was over, the lives of everyone inside that restaurant were about to change forever. Johnny quietly watched Ethan disappear into the kitchen. The young boy moved quickly from table to table, clearing dishes, wiping spills, and carrying heavy trays without a single complaint. Yet no one thanked him. No one smiled at him. To most people in the restaurant, Ethan was invisible. Johnny looked around the room once more. The expensive suits, sparkling jewelry, and luxury watches suddenly seemed meaningless. Because true character wasn't measured by what someone wore. It was measured by how they treated people who could do nothing for them. A few moments later, the same waiter finally returned to Johnny's table. Without even making eye contact, he dropped the menu onto the table. "What would you like?" Johnny smiled politely. "I'll have the grilled salmon and a cup of black coffee." The waiter scribbled something on his pad. Then he muttered just loudly enough for nearby customers to hear, "I hope you know the prices before you order." Several people at nearby tables chuckled. Johnny simply nodded. "Thank you." The waiter walked away, convinced he had embarrassed another ordinary customer. But fate had something else planned. Almost 15 minutes later, the restaurant's front doors opened again. This time, a well-dressed elderly gentleman entered. He wasn't just another customer. He was the owner of the restaurant. As he greeted guests, his eyes suddenly fell on the man sitting quietly in the corner. He stopped walking. For a second, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He immediately walked toward Johnny with a wide smile. "Mr. Depp, it's truly an honor to have you here." The entire restaurant fell silent. Forks stopped moving. Conversations ended instantly. The waiter froze. His face turned pale. Customers who had laughed moments earlier stared at Johnny in complete disbelief. The manager rushed over, confused. "Sir, is everything all right?" The owner looked at him with surprise. "You didn't recognize our guest?" The manager slowly turned toward Johnny. Only then did he realize who had been sitting quietly in the corner all this time. His heart sank. I'm so sorry, Mr. Depp. We had no idea." Johnny raised a gentle hand. "Please, you don't need to apologize for not recognizing me." The manager sighed with relief. But before he could speak again, Johnny calmly added, "You should apologize for something else." The room became silent once again. The manager swallowed nervously. Johnny looked toward Ethan, who was quietly cleaning a nearby table. "That young man. He treated me with kindness before he knew who I was. Everyone else judged me before speaking a single word." The owner slowly looked toward Ethan. "Is that true?" Ethan immediately became nervous. I was only bringing him some water, sir." The owner smiled warmly. "You did exactly what every employee here should have done." Then his expression changed as he turned toward the waiter. "Did you refuse to serve this gentleman because of his appearance?" The waiter lowered his head. "Yes." The manager quickly stepped forward. "I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Depp. The waiter will be dismissed immediately." Everyone expected Johnny to agree. Some customers even nodded, believing the waiter deserved to lose his job. But Johnny quietly shook his head. "No." The manager looked confused. "No? I don't want anyone fired." The owner frowned slightly. "But after the way he treated you." Johnny smiled. "If people were thrown away every time they made a mistake, none of us would deserve a second chance." The waiter slowly looked up. unable to believe what he was hearing. Johnny stood from his chair. He walked over to the waiter until they were standing face to face. I've made mistakes in my own life. I know what it's like to be judged. So today,
I'm choosing forgiveness.
the waiter could no longer hold back his emotions. Tears filled his eyes. I'm so sorry. I judged you because of your clothes. I never stopped to see the person. Johnny gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Remember this. Respect shouldn't depend on someone's fame, or their money, or the car they drive. The person wearing the oldest jacket in the room may have the kindest heart. The restaurant became completely silent. Some customers lowered their heads in embarrassment. Others quietly wiped tears from their eyes. The businessman who had laughed earlier slowly stood up. He walked over to Ethan. For the way we've treated you. I'm sorry. One by one, several customers began thanking Ethan for his hard work. For the first time since starting his job there, he felt seen. The owner turned toward Ethan with a smile. From today, you'll begin training as our customer service assistant. And your education, I'll personally pay for it. Ethan couldn't speak. Tears rolled down his face as he whispered, Thank you. Months passed. The restaurant had changed. Every customer, regardless of appearance, was welcomed with the same smile. The staff had learned that kindness was not a luxury. It was a choice. Ethan continued studying while working part-time. His confidence grew. His dreams no longer felt impossible. One quiet evening, the restaurant doors opened once again. A man wearing the same faded jacket and old baseball cap stepped inside. Before anyone recognized him, the waiter walked forward with a warm smile. Good evening, sir. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Johnny smiled. This time, the welcome wasn't for a celebrity. It was for a human being. He glanced toward Ethan, who was now wearing a supervisor's badge. Their eyes met. Neither of them needed words. Both understood that one small act of kindness had changed many lives. As Johnny finished his coffee and prepared to leave, he quietly placed a folded note beneath his cup. After he walked out, Ethan picked it up. The note read, The world changes when ordinary people choose extraordinary kindness. Never stop being one of them. There was no signature. It wasn't needed. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds had cleared. And somewhere beyond the city lights, another stranger was probably waiting for someone to treat them with simple kindness. But sometime, the greatest gift you can give another person isn't money. It isn't fame. It isn't power. It's making them feel that they matter.